Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. And with me today, I've got a very special guest, Adam Haile. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Did I pronounce the name right?
You did, in fact.
Okay.
It is Haile.
At the very last second, I was like, oh no, what did he say again?
What did I say 2 minutes ago? Yeah, no, it's Haile. I've gotten everything. I've had teachers that I knew from K through 12, and they still called me by the wrong last name. So, whatever.
It just is what it is, I suppose. I have a difficult to pronounce family name as well, so it just is what it is at this point.
Exactly.
So, I just met you, and I purposely stayed away from your stuff so I get some natural questioning going on. So, can you introduce yourself to me and the listeners and tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Sure. I'm kind of all over the place. I am a software engineer by trade. That's my actual degree, is in software engineering. Oddly enough, not computer science. We can discuss the difference between those two if you want.
Sure.
Although, as all my friends from college would tell me, I'm not an actual engineer. I'm just a software engineer. It doesn't count. But I've been doing that for, pushing 20 years at this point. I've worked in a wide array of industries, from banking to mobile data collection to now lasers. I currently work for Lightburn Software, doing laser cutter control software. Before that, as we were discussing before the break, I worked for Red Hat for 5 years doing open source stuff with Linux, which is always fun. And then in my own life, I am a constant maker of everything and constantly jumping from one new skill set to the next because I always like learning new stuff. So 3D printing is definitely at the top of them. Laser cutting of all things. I'm getting into CNC machining lately. I keep a workshop full of pretty much a hardware store's worth of parts, so I can make whatever I want to whenever I want to. Which spans the gamut from crazy machines to, like, for example, right now I'm building a cumulative UV meter for my mother, who's a photographer.
Interesting. But that's kind of like the maker's curse, right? We kind of try to keep everything in stock, but I don't know if that ever happens to you. But for me, I've got almost 100 episodes of Mailbag with on YouTube, with 5 items per mailbag at the very least. And somehow all my new projects require some new parts. I don't know if that happens to you.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's always times where I need something new, and it's like my father always used to say, no project is done without at least 2 trips to the hardware store. I always am needing something new, but what I'm talking about is like the standard consumables. Like, I got to the point a couple of years ago where I was sick of having to find online the right, metric bolt or whatever. So I finally went on, I can't remember, I think it's Bolt Depot or one of those. I found some for cheap, and I bought every size of M3, M4, and M5 bolt that they had.
That's a bit much.
It is. And it's not as crazy as you would think cost-wise. It was like a couple $100. But I didn't buy a ton of all of them. I bought like 25 or something like that. But now I have bins with all of them, and I restock them from time to time. So it's stuff like that. I always like to make sure I keep on hand all sorts of wires. And, well, one of the weird things I do always keep on hand is Raspberry Pis. If I ever see them, like, for a good cost, I will buy 4 or 5 because I will use them.
I am just crying in Canadian from that statement because Raspberry Pis here are like, well, I wouldn't say rare. Just imagine the exact US dollar cost, and then bring it up here, and, convert it to our currency. So we lose we add about 30% to that. And then there's like a Canadian tax. And I'm not talking about sales tax. I'm talking about literally companies willing to stock things in Canada. That adds another like 50% on top of that.
I always found that so weird because it's like, I understand that I have, friends in Australia who always say everything's so expensive. And it's partly just getting it there. But like, Canada's, not exactly in a remote location.
No, not most of the Canadians, at least.
Well, yeah, not
Absolutely.
most of the Canadians. Yeah, you're right. Most of them live like what, within 100 miles of the border or something like that.
Oh yeah,
And
and
you'd
it's
think that they'd be able
profiteering.
to get them.
No, it's definitely profiteering because I think the most egregious example, because you brought up Australia a while
Hmm.
ago, when Adobe set its pricing for Australia. This was before the Creative Cloud stuff where you
Oh,
had to
before
pay
the
a
subscription.
recurring. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was cheaper for an Australian to buy a flight to California, buy the software, and then fly back
Oh my
than it was
God.
to buy it in Australia. So it's all profiteering. It's all taking advantage of
It's the
the
worst.
the market forces and whatever. Because I think I think like, and you'll have to allow me to do a generalization here, but I think Americans in general are so used to sort of competitive pricing that in most markets they just refuse to buy things over a certain price
Right.
point. Whereas other countries, it's just like, oh, great, this is the industry standard. This is what the this what became the industry standard because of the U.S. adoption of it. So now we're stuck paying whatever price Adobe wants to charge us, basically.
Yeah. US is definitely the land of way too many choices sometimes.
Yeah,
You go to the grocery store and there's like 18 different versions of peanut butter, and it's like, do we really need that? I don't know. And yeah, you can always get it cheaper somewhere else. But I get that. If there's not as much population, not as many different stores, there's not as much market force to bring the price down.
but this is actually software. This is actually tying very well into what you do, what you have done, and what you do, and what you stand for.
Mm,
Open source software.
absolutely.
Can you talk to me about what's so important about open source software to you?
To me, it's one of those things where, and admittedly, like I got into this over time. In terms of being a bit of a zealot of it, and it's waxed and waned. And like, I don't work for an open source company now, but I still greatly stand for having things be open source if they can be. Um, to me, it's just, I don't think that everything needs to be that commercial item where we have to charge a god awful amount of money for someone to use it and lock people out of being able to use it. If people are willing to give their time and make something happen, like I have been with many of my personal open source projects, like I think that's great, and I'm more than happy to give that time away, especially if it's something that I'm writing for myself. Like, I default to this is going to be a thing that I at least put on GitHub. It may not be well documented. I may not do much with it beyond a certain time, but I did it. It might be useful to someone else, and therefore I would like it to be useful if it can be. Um, I would rather have that model than we have to, be like Adobe and charge a god awful price on everything and potentially lock people out of being able to use their software if it's useful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sucks being here because basically my hands are tied. If I see something that would be great as an open source piece of software, I
Hmm.
always sit here at my desk and think this ought to be a thing.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about it. I don't know anything about coding, and I think it's kind of sad that I can't just make these projects happen, which I definitely plan on helping out the open source community once I learn coding, which I'm
Right.
currently into. But it's a little disconcerting when I think that I don't think that's very difficult to do. Like, just I'll give you an example. Like my work, we switched over to a cheaper shop management software
Right.
because we were bought a long story. The owners
I get
ain't
it.
the same. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Um, and the software is written such trash that I feel like someone like you could probably develop something better in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, how hard is it to add like mouse over text over abbreviations? Like, there's none of that here. There's no sorting. There's no, like, it's all stuff which is silly because I'm like literally picking up C++ from a textbook at the moment,
Right.
and like sorting algorithms or methods of doing sorting is in the current chapter I'm in, chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how hard is it to implement these things? And so as a non-coder, this is so frustrating to me.
It's one of those things where software lives and dies in the details, because you can have something that does the task, but if it's not easy to use, it's not necessarily worth anything to you. But the problem of it is that, just kind of like we were talking about before with, market forces in Canada and Raspberry Pis being expensive, software can charge whatever they want, or as much as someone's willing to pay for it. And if that's the only option, they can not only charge whatever they want, but they also don't have to put that much effort into it.
That's very true.
A weird example, and this is kind of straying from the open source thing, but it fits with it, and I'll get back to it. So with the laser stuff that I work with, Lightburn was created because the default software for the, say, higher end, but what we call DSP or FPGA based laser controllers was not good. And like, you're talking about those little things like sorting things or tooltips or whatever. It had none of those. It looks like it's from Windows 98. I kid you not. Like, if you go to connect to the laser, well, you have to select a COM port. Well, most software, it would show you the available COM ports. On this software, it just shows you COM 1 through COM 255. Pick one.
Oh my God.
Like, that's the kind of thing that you run into. But the thing of it is they have no incentive to make it better, or had no incentive. I mean, maybe they do now. But in the software I'm talking about, it's called RDWorks. I'm not trying to just like call them out specifically, but in a lot of software for hardware like this is like that. They were the only ones that had software that could control their hardware. So you get it to the bare minimum of usage. And beyond that, they don't care. You don't have a choice. So whatever. It doesn't matter. Which is one of the reasons why I really love open source software, is because most of the time, if someone's working on something and it's open source, they're working on it because they inherently have a need and inherently are enjoying it.
Yep.
So they're going to go, well, I want to make this nicer for myself and for, the other people that are using it. So they're going to put that time into it. As opposed to a lot of software, which is literally just the bare minimum of functionality.
Yeah. And I, I'm the type of person that things grate me, things rub me the wrong way. And I would love to be able to say, look, your software is awesome. Mm-hmm. However, these features are missing. Here, I coded them in. If you like my changes, implement it into your thing, right? Like, I would much rather do that than sit here at my desk and be like, why doesn't somebody fix this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's great. And obviously, as a longtime maintainer of various open source projects, I love it when people can do that and bring it to you. I think one of the other things though too, that a lot of people don't think is necessarily useful, like they think, oh, it doesn't matter if I do this, is if you're using something, if you find an issue with it, of like actually providing a good bug report. And I do mean a good bug report, not, hey, this thing doesn't work, but hey, this is what I tried. This was the system, this is what I expected. This is what happened. All of the steps, here's how to reproduce it. I love those, because even if you didn't provide me with a code, I can go fix it, because now I know how to reproduce it.
Yeah.
For the open source world, that's just incredibly valuable.
My experience with, let's say, the closed source world, like the privatized code world, is they usually send you back a boilerplate email saying, oh, thanks for your interest in whatever my project is. I hate that. I would much rather be speaking to a small dedicated team. Like, even in the video games I play, I tend to play smaller indie developed games, because you have a much better connection to the people who are making the products. And nobody's ever going to say that a game like Kerbal Space Program is terribly made. Like, some of the code is spaghetti, I'm sure. Absolutely. But I mean, the game is awesome, and it was developed at like 1/10 of the budget than, any of the Blizzard games were made by,
Right. Well, I mean, that's one of those things where, like, it's interesting. I worked at Red Hat for 5 years. Everything they do is open source. That's the core of the company. But it was a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and you would still sometimes get those boilerplates of, okay, thanks, we've received your input, we'll figure it out. The funny thing is, I work for Lightbird now, and it's closed source, it's proprietary, it's reasonably priced though. Um, I'm not trying to make this an ad for it, but the thing of it is though is the devs that work on it, and there's only 4 of us right now, and that's only relatively recent that we've had that many. We're all huge nerds, and we also really hate it when there's bugs in our own code. So a lot of the time when someone reports something on like the forum, I'll fix it that day, and it'll be in the next release.
That is actually awesome.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about working on stuff like that. It's like, okay, I'm not working on an open source project anymore. Fine. There's a lot of reasons why I would like to, but I have the ability and the latitude to be able to do fixes like that where they can just handle it. Or like the other day, I had someone asking about the project file format, like how we save the jobs and stuff to a file, and they were wondering how they could do something because they were trying to write a script to it to modify the file. We don't provide direct documentation because most people don't care, but I also have no problem telling them how the file format works and giving him a hand to do what he wanted to do with some automation. And like, I love being able to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. I honestly, if there was a department that would respond to inquiries that well, I think the open source projects would take a little bit of a hit, because I think that's one of the big things about open source projects is you get access to passionate people.
Right.
Whereas a lot of big faceless companies, they actually don't, I don't think they care about most of their users. They only care about their big corporate accounts, the people who are buying thousands of keys at a time, and not
Absolutely.
necessarily.
Yeah, they're still beholden to those customers and potentially shareholders or something like that. And that is definitely the thing. I mean, when I worked at Red Hat, I worked on OpenShift, which is their container Linux platform, which may not mean anything to you, but we built a really old version of it, and we had to build it like on a laptop because I'll just say a bank still used a really old version and refused to upgrade. So when a bug would be patched, we would patch it way back, like 9 versions back, so that we could do a build for them.
Wow. I mean, it's weird. Banks, they for being so important, they're often way behind in tech. I don't think it was that long ago a friend of mine was saying that where she worked, they were still running XP.
Oh God, yeah. No, I mean, I had a guy that I worked with at Red Hat who had worked at a bank. I don't remember which one it was. And at one point, their online banking, like HTML5 based Web 2.0 style, like web banking, broke because someone changed one of the backend systems that ran on an old mainframe, and it turned out that the web system was literally just telnetting into that and screen scraping.
Oh God.
And they had shifted a field over by one character.
Oh my God.
And it broke all of online banking for like a day and a half.
Brutal.
Yeah. I mean, that's how, because, you're on this old mainframe and it's like, well, we could move to something new, but that's expensive. We'll do it next year. And then that goes on and on and on until suddenly you're running a 30-year-old mainframe system and you have no real recourse for upgrade.
Do you run Linux on your home PC?
I run everything on my home PC right now.
Okay.
I have Linux on it of varying flavors. Mostly Ubuntu and Fedora. I actually dev in Windows for the most part.
Interesting.
Primarily because most of our users, like 90 or 88 something percent, are Windows users. We have a handful, a bunch of Mac users and a very, very small set of Linux users, but very, very happy Linux users that we actually release the software for Linux. So
Are you a fan of Linus Tech Tips on YouTube?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I watch it.
Have you seen the Linux Gaming Challenge?
I think I've seen the first episode.
Yeah, only one episode's out so far.
Okay, yeah. I have seen that, and it was a little painful watching him try to install Pop OS.
Steam install was the best for me. I mean,
yeah.
What happened there? What's your commentary on what happened? I'll just set it up for the viewers, and the viewers should go watch it. But for the viewers, Linus, which is basically a YouTube tech guru at this point,
Yeah.
Never daily drove Linux before, so he decided to try it out. Him and his coworker Luke.
Mm-hmm.
He chose a very beginner-friendly, I guess it's called a distribution, because theoretically all Linux is kind of the same.
Distro, as we would say in the
distro,
field.
Yeah. I don't think I'm allowed to say the D word yet because I'm not at that level.
Okay. No, it's fine. We're all inclusive here.
Okay. Well, sorta. You should read the comments on that video.
Oh my God, I know it. There are issues to the open source world. We'll just say that.
Yeah. So anyway, so he installs a very beginner friendly one, and literally the first thing he did before he after installing, and I think he just checked to see if his sound is working, if all his hardware was detected.
Mm-hmm.
He went into the package manager, which is like an app store of types, and he tried to install Steam, and Steam said, hold on, you know, we have to uninstall all this stuff. And it's like jargon. And he Googles around a bit, and I know why you're laughing. He Googles around a bit, and somewhere he found a solution where he just needed to type a line in the terminal, which all the Linux fanboys will tell you need to do everything in the terminal.
Uh-huh.
But there is a safety in the terminal to stop you from doing something critically bad, which is you have to, it tells you, if you want to do this, you have to type yes, do as I say. So he typed that, and then it uninstalled all his graphical interface. That's what the quote unquote fix was doing. So
yep. Yeah, someone was just clearly screwing with them or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, that reminds me of, like, I used to do tech support, and like the woman saying, you know, basically like there was nothing on her computer. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, I'd asked, you know, my nephew or something what I could do to fix it, and he told me this command, and I was like, what was it? It was format C. Oh God. Yeah. Yep. Linux is one of those weird things. And actually it's funny you say like do everything from the command line. Like before I worked at Red Hat, you know, I'd used Git and GitHub and all of that stuff, but I had mostly been actually deving from Windows and Mac, and I used a graphical, you know, Git client, and that's what I was used to. Even though I was relatively comfortable with command line stuff, I used a graphical client. And then when I was working at Red Hat at first, I was like really looking for a graphical client for Git on Linux, and all of them suck. They're terrible. I mean, like compared to the Windows, you know, Windows and Mac ones, anyways.
Yeah.
And eventually, I just gave in, and now, like, I couldn't imagine using Git from anything but the UI. I have my coworkers that'll be like, "How do I do this in Git?" And I give them the command. They're like, "No, how do I do it from GitHub? You know, UI?" It's like, I don't know.
It's weird, huh? So, like, if you were to advise Linus, what would you recommend that a total Linux beginner start with?
Probably, you know, and you're gonna have people flame warring on this on either side. So,
and that's fine. We're gonna get the comments going. That's
probably all. Ubuntu just to start. But I mean, I admit it's one of those, like, I think even he like made some comment about it. He like looked it up and it was like Ubuntu, easy to install but complex or something like that. There was like something that was contradictory to itself. I found Ubuntu is generally pretty good about just kind of hiding away like the weird stuff, and usually, yeah, the App Store works. I'm actually more of a fan of Fedora personally, but I think that's honestly just from 5 years of indoctrination and using it, because that's what I use every day at work, and I'm really used to it. Another good one, probably even maybe better than Ubuntu, is Mint, mostly because if you're coming from Windows or even really Mac, the UI is like a little bit better. It's a little bit closer to what you're used to, as opposed to like, oh my god, where do I get anything? Um, Ubuntu still insists on putting like all the little icons on the right, and there's no real app menu, and or not easily accessible. I know someone's screaming at their computer screen
Let
right
them
now as I listen
scream.
to it.
We need the engagement in the comments anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean those are generally pretty good, but even still, like they've been saying like Linux is going to have its year in on the desktop, this year, and that's the year that we're going to take it over. And it's like, but is it?
They've been
Again,
saying
that's
that
one
since
of
2001, as far as I know, maybe
yeah,
before that.
forever. I mean, since before I was in college, and like they. It's kind of like you were saying before. I was joking about the United States has too much choice when it comes to stuff. Linux has too much choice when it comes to that.
Yep, that's very true.
There's always going to be some weird way of doing it, some different thing. And like the way I actually got the job at Lightburn was I wrote the first Linux installer for it. Before it was just here's a zip file and it's got the executable in it and have fun. And the installer is honestly not a lot better than that. It's basically a self-extracting executable, and it puts things in the right place. And if you're on, like GNOME or KDE or something like that, it will put a file there so that it shows up in your app list and things. But it's not like a .deb or a .rpm package or anything that like does the quote-unquote right thing to install it on your system with all of the packages. And partly that's out of an issue of, like I said, we have a small subset of Linux users, so there's a maximum amount of effort we'll put into doing like an installer like that. Like we've had a lot of people say, "Oh, I want a Debian package." Like, this is good enough for like 99.9% of the people that are using it. It's fine. But doing installers like that is complex. We get weird things where it's like, oh, it works on Ubuntu 20, but then on 21, it can't check for updates because they changed the SSL libraries and now they don't mesh well.
Yep.
Okay. Whereas I could probably install SimCity 2000 on my Windows 11 machine and it would work.
Oh, yeah. Almost guaranteed.
Right.
And that's the weird thing, because in my research, I saw someone say that one of the big problems with Linux is that if you want a binary, so just something, I may be doing this wrong because I'm not a wizard myself, but if you want a binary for Linux, you can't have a binary that'll work on all Linux.
Correct.
Whereas a binary for Mac OS will work from Mac OS and a binary for Windows. And you know who said that? Linus Torvalds.
Yeah,
or Linus? What's his name?
I'm honestly not. I think it's Linus, but I'm not honestly sure.
Yeah. So the founder of Linux, for those of you listening at home, he said the big problem with Linux is that you can't make something that'll install on every flavor of Linux.
Right.
Or not easily, whatever that means.
Absolutely. And I mean, part of the issue there is that Linux expects you to kind of bring your own stuff. So why would I build a binary and include the SSL library in that executable because you should have it?
That's right.
Except when it doesn't match the version that I built against. Now it's a problem. So like one of the things that's become popular on Linux is like, we'll just run everything from Docker or run everything from a snap package or a Flatpak or one of those, which are basically ways of taking all of those dependencies and isolating them from the system and then wrapping them up into a little mini instance of a computer. And then it can run isolated. And like, that's probably the best thing that they've been able to come up with. And it's a brilliant idea and it's great for a lot of reasons. It's great for security, but it does also complicate things. So,
yeah, it just, I don't have a solution. And the thing is, I've been thinking I need to build myself I have to build myself a sort of, what would you call that? I guess, sort of like a standalone type, computer, because I keep getting these, products from China with software written at, with the words minimum viable in mind.
Yes.
And I I don't know enough to know if I can trust this software or not. So I need to have like another PC that is not connected to the internet, that doesn't
Yeah.
have any personal information on it. And, obviously I'm thinking I want something that'll dual boot Linux and Windows. So like all these things are going through my head right now. I don't know the answer. This is the weird part. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean it's completely viable, and I've 100% done that. You basically have like an air gapped machine. I've also done it as a virtual machine, which is a little bit more dangerous, but it's at least better than running it direct. Um,
Yep.
but
I
yeah,
basically need
it's an
a
option.
machine behind a condom. That's what I need.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean I get it. It's like I've certainly done that in the past. Where it's like I don't really know what's on here, and I'm not sure I want to run this. Um, Yeah, and especially when you're getting like foreign made software for weird hardware that who knows who the actual manufacturer is, that can get a little bit sketchy.
Definitely. Especially since I rely on my PC to do my day job and to do the YouTube thing.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to screw that up. Yeah, I've got like this weird setup here because partly for the Lightburn stuff and partly I was just already doing things like this myself. But to be able to like test on different systems and virtual machines are fine, but when you're interfacing with hardware, that can get complicated. And I guess I forgot, I didn't mention this before. I ran a open source hardware company for 7 years with a friend of mine. Um, and when I was testing that stuff, I would want to test it on like Mac and Linux and whatnot. But it's kind of hard through a virtual machine to do like a serial com interface over a USB device with a thing that's plugged into your physical machine, but not necessarily connected to the virtual machine.
Yeah, you have to hand off the ports, right, or something.
Right. And like that works sometimes, but it's, fantastic with like an Arduino style device where when you connect to it, it resets, which then often resets the connection. So then you're screwed. So like I've got a KVM sitting on my desk that isn't actually hooked up to any of my monitors, but it's hooked up to a bunch of different machines, like a little NUC and a Mac Mini and some Raspberry Pis and some stuff like that. And the output of it actually goes to an HDMI to USB capture device, and then I can just view the monitors in the camera app on my computer.
Yeah, I feel like I need to set up like a micro ITX machine
Right.
somewhere and then just like VNC into it or whatever.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I can highly recommend for doing stuff like that. Parsec is very fast and works quite well.
Is that paid software?
No, there's a free tier.
Okay, awesome.
And it works fine. I used to use like real VNC and stuff because then you can kind of get to it with like man in the middle stuff, so I can get to my stuff from anywhere. But that it's paid beyond 4 devices or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
I haven't found a limit with Parsec, but it works really well for stuff like that. I've got a bunch of headless machines just sitting around.
Nice.
But
okay, it's been half an hour of talking
software.
about software. let's because you're not, I mean, I called you a wizard, but that's a little bit reductionist because I see you have quite a bit of hardware projects too. Can you just pick an interesting one and let's chat about that one?
Sure. Okay. So let's see some of my favorite ones. I will bring up one that is probably one of the ones I'm more well known for, which is the All Pixel, which I did. Oh God, is that 7 years ago, 6 years ago? It was a while ago. It is kind of back from the early heyday of when like the digital LED strips, like NeoPixels, became
Yep.
a big thing. Now it's NeoPixel and Dot Star, or as I would actually call them, WS2812B and APA 102, which is the actual name. It's just Adafruit decided to brand them, which is fine. Before those were like the standards. When I got my start in it, there was 12 different chips with different protocols that you could use, and they were kind of a pain. And you really generally only control them from from a microcontroller. But I wanted to be able to control them from my computer. So my friend and I built the device, which we ended up calling the All Pixel, which I always described as a video card for your LEDs. And really all it was it had some firmware on, like an 18 mega chip that understood all of the protocols and then just took a byte stream from the computer of RGB, 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 and then would just do the right thing on the other end. So you could configure it to say, okay, I want you to run LPD 8806, and you have 70 LEDs, and it would just reconfigure itself. And then from software, you could, like from Python, so you could do it from a Raspberry Pi or your laptop or a PC or whatever. You could send the LED data over to that and control those. That we did a Kickstarter for, and sold many thousands of them over the years.
Thousands of them. Okay. Were
Yeah.
these sold in kit form or were they assembled?
Initially, they were like partially assembled. So the original version was a handful of. There were some surface mount components like the AT Mega chip and a few others that were pre-assembled, and then there was some through-hole stuff like the headers and smoothing cap and some stuff like that you could solder on. They were mostly kind of the more like the optional parts, and then we did a mini version which was sort of compacted and all surface mount and completely pre-assembled. Which those were sold just as is. Nothing you needed to do with them.
And so, okay, did you guys do your own assembly, or did you have a assembly service put them together?
We used Seed Studio
Okay.
in China as a contract manufacturer. We didn't. It's funny. I've done electronics now for over a decade, and I still am terrible at surface mount soldering.
Me too. That's why I'm live streaming soldering 630 0603 LEDs.
Oh my God, no. Even I put together like a tightly controlled hot plate to do reflow, and I never was able to get good at it, and I just hated it. Like I've had times where it's just like, it's cheap enough these days to just have PCBWay or JLC PCB or one of them just assemble it for me. Back when we started, it'd be like, oh, I want 5 boards, and then it'd be like, okay, that's $3,000, and now it's like that'll be $100. Okay,
Assembled,
assembled fully
shipped.
assembled. I mean, I've got some boards sitting right next to me now that are they're 6 by 10 inches PCBs. I mean, they're not assembled, but 10 years ago, getting a 6 by 10 inch PCB would be ungodly expensive in small quantities, and I bought 5 of them, and they were like $20.
Oh yeah, I mean, my last order, I'm sponsored by PCBWay, nice. But basically, it's like a nothing burger, because I think my 10 boards from my last order, they were under the $5, whatever, and I'm quote unquote a loyal customer, so it's actually $4, and then the rest of the cost is express shipping. It was like, what was it, like $22
in boards and $20 in DHL shipping is usually what it is for me. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like, man, PCBs are at a point now where they're more accessible than etching your own at home.
Yeah,
way more.
Exactly. Oh, and that's how I got started with that, with like OSH Park initially, before all the Chinese companies kind of undercut them. And don't get me wrong, I love OSH Park. I love all the guys there. But I've had times where it's like I said, I got to do a 6 by 10 inch board, and it's just not cost effective for me to do that. As much as I love the purple,
because I think OSH Park, they got started by selling the empty board space in their runs, right?
Right. It was what was it? It was a Portland hackerspace would do batch buys of PCB runs for their members.
Oh, that's what happened. Okay.
And then they opened it up to just whoever online, and then that expanded into Osh Park. Which I've got, bins full of purple boards. Like, don't get me wrong, I've done tons. But as I've started to get into kind of larger stuff, that's gotten more complicated. And oddly enough, this isn't even the 6 by 10 inch board I was talking about isn't even like something like I'm releasing. It's literally I designed, even though I'm a software engineer at work, I designed a circuit board for us for some testing we needed to do. Stuff like that's fun. Just I get to dive back into hardware instead of software for the day.
I definitely wish I could do something like that for a living, but more like on my spare time, because my primary passion is still teaching, because that's the greatest thing. I mean, if the college would let me be teaching right now, that's what I'd be doing. But contracts and stuff, you know.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do enjoy teaching this stuff as well. It's definitely um, a fun thing to do. I would agree. Um, and like with the circuit design stuff, it's one of those where like I've picked up a decent amount when I ran the company Monaco Labs, which did the open source hardware and stuff. My partner in crime, Dan, is an actual electrical engineer, so he's far better at that stuff than I was. But I just, I couldn't sit idly by and not learn how to do the, circuit EDA stuff. I
That
had to
is
figure
such
that out.
that is such a maker trait. Like you can't like I don't know about you, but when I go like okay, I'll give you an example. My furnace broke down last year or the year before,
Right.
and the first thing I did was I popped the covers open and see if I could use my diagnostic skills as an automotive guy.
Oh, absolutely.
And I actually got it diagnosed within like 30 seconds. But when the guy, because in Canada here, anything natural gas is regulated. You can't do
Absolutely.
your own work. You can't even buy your own parts. In fact, you need
Oh,
a
wow.
license to buy the parts.
Wow.
So when the guy came down to replace the part, it was just a blower fan. I mean, it's like 3 screws and an electrical connection. But anyways, whatever,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When he was doing he gave me a free like the seasonal service. I was like, I am learning everything I can. He's like, you can just go hang out. You don't need to be here if you don't want to. I'm like, you know what? I'm learning.
Oh, yeah.
I think makers were so curious by design.
I have certainly, hopefully not annoyed too much, many a service person over the years. Like I had solar panels installed and the electricians were there hooking everything up, and I did not leave my garage during that time. And it's like, I finally tell them, it's like, I'm not here trying to inspect your work. I'm just really curious. I'm just interested.
I actually, a lot of my coworkers at the shop where I work, they get annoyed when the customers stand by the door and watch them work. But I actually, I feel like it's that kind of engagement that everyone should have, because they don't know me,
Right.
and I'm working on stuff that if I make a mistake, they could potentially die. They could lose a wheel on the highway and die.
Yeah.
And it bothers me a little that people trust me. Like, I mean, like I know I'm trustworthy, but I know also that I've gotten cars come back from other shops that these people should not be touching tools ever again.
Yeah.
How do you put your trust in someone like that? Like maybe I have trust issues because when I get onto a plane, I'm like, those people that fix cars that shouldn't be fixing cars. Is there any of those that worked on this plane? But
oh, absolutely. And well, I think that's a big difference between sort of like the general population who think that a lot of things are wizardry and don't necessarily take the time to want to understand how they work, and people like those that are of the kind of maker mindset where it's like, no, I want to know how it works. But that also means that you're like, why would anyone trust me? Like,
yeah,
at the same time. But
it's scary.
I'm all for people being interested in stuff like that. If someone wants to learn and I'm doing something, I'm more than happy to show them. And I love it when people like that, that are like working on my house or something, are also more than happy to, put up with me asking questions and stuff like that. Because, I like being informed and whatnot.
Yeah, if I had my way, I would have a full reference website designed by me with everything people need to know about their car and then some. But it's just I don't have the time. I don't have the skills. Like, man, I do know people that build websites like it's the back of their hand. But like, I don't feel right. Even if these people want to build a website for me for free, I'm like, I don't feel right taking something for free
time.
like that.
Yeah.
And I think I need more hours in a day. So if someone wants to build a time machine,
absolutely,
contact me, simpleelectronicsyt@gmail.com.
I mean, yeah, if I could have like a 36-hour day or just not have to sleep anymore, I would absolutely be all for that.
Okay, so Adam and I will do all the test work on your either Sleep Depriver 5000 or DeLorean, whatever.
Oh God, I would love that. I'm also a huge Back to the Future fan, so I'm all for it being a DeLorean where I just travel back in time or
I think it
whatever.
kind of has to at this point. I think it's either a DeLorean or a hot tub. I don't really know how else you're going to build a time machine these
I
days.
mean, pretty much, maybe both. I don't know.
Maybe a
Yeah,
DeLorean shaped hot tub or a hot tub.
DeLorean with a hot tub in it. I don't. That wouldn't work. I mean, the car's already really heavy. It's stainless steel, so there's
It's so
that.
weird, huh? They picked stainless instead of aluminum. Different times.
Yeah, I think maybe aluminum was really expensive at the time. I don't know.
Possibly. I
Yeah.
think now it's switched over. I think aluminum's cheaper than
Oh yeah.
stainless.
No, aluminum's been pretty cheap, which has been nice because I bought a bunch of it recently. But for the aforementioned like learning CNC machining, although one thing you mentioned about makers always wanting to learn new stuff, it reminded me of like one of the weird things about my own personal relationship to being known for things, and I know we talked about the Alpexel, and there's other things in there, is that one of the things that scares me the most is actually getting really well known for something and then being the guy that did that thing and nothing else.
Ooh, okay. This
Like,
is a fear I didn't know I had, but I think I have too.
sorry, I didn't mean to instill the fear in you, but like, there's some like I know some people who, okay, like a really weird example. This is kind of goes to the Linux thing. Do you know of the command curl? CURL.
No.
Okay, it's a command line command to download stuff from the internet. So curl, you give it a web address or an FTP address or whatever. It supports a lot of things and it downloads stuff. The guy that's been working on that, and granted, I know he's known for other things, but he's been working on that for like 24 years.
Wow.
And I can't even imagine working on anything for that long because my attention span is not that long. Like with the LED stuff that I worked on for the Allpixel and whatnot, I also wrote a Python library for that. And eventually I just had to basically say, look, I'm not, I know it's popular, but I'm not working on it anymore because I'm interested in other things. And I wanted to get more into lasers and CNC machining and 3D printers and stuff like that. And I didn't have time to constantly be developing a Python library for something that I wasn't using. Whereas when I developed it, I was making crazy LED displays all of the time. But I had to step away from that because it's like, I do not want to be pigeonholed into this one thing that this is all I'm known for. And now, well, no, you can't go do other things because you're the LED guy.
That's a really interesting take because like I feel like I'm on the other end of that. I feel like I'm only very good at one thing, which is fixing cars, and I've been doing it for I can't math, but since 2006. So that's quite a while. And now I'm like looking for avenues to push that information out to the world. But I guess once I'm done that, I guess then it would be time to let it go. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. And like, for anyone who, if there's someone, something like that you really enjoy and that's the thing that you want to do, fantastic. I'm not saying that, my particular path is what everyone should be. And I think it's great that there's lots of people who they're very passionate about the thing and that's what they want to do. But I'm the type where it's very much, jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing.
Yep.
Where I learn a lot of stuff. I'm not really a master at any of them, but I know a lot of things. And it's because once I learn something good enough to apply it decently well, I want to move on to something else.
Yeah, I feel very similar because like, again, automotive, I did it for a living. Anything else I haven't really, but I guess I have such a broad interest spectrum. Like
Right.
I love computers, for example, built my own computers since high school. I love 3D printing. I'm looking around my shop. I have three working 3D printers, and I'm designing and building a fourth one. Next thing is laser cutters. That's the next one on the list, but that one's a bit expensive.
Yeah,
they're a little bit
you can
pricey.
start small. It's fine.
So Okay, so because this is, January 6th, by the time people listen to this, there is a company that sent me a laser
Mm.
engraver as
Okay.
a review unit. So it's one of those open,
Right.
2020 extrusion things. That's not quite what I'm looking for, but I will start there. So there's that.
Right. That's a good place to start.
I may have to try Lightburn too, but what is it,
For sure.
$77 at the time?
It's 60 for the G code version.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. So
I
yeah,
don't know what that converts to in Canadian.
yeah, probably.
Probably more.
Well, about 35% more than that, whatever
Okay.
that is.
Yeah.
65 times 1.3, $85. So
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe I'll know enough C++ by January to design my own.
I mean, hey, there's a trial. There are open source things out there which plenty of people use. I mean, I'm not here to like force Lightburn down anyone's
No,
throat.
no, I know.
Um,
I'm also teasing because I'm
yeah,
also cheap. So there's that.
you know
I will
the
I will
sorry.
deal with a lot before I have to pay for something usually.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's the equation that we all have to do is how much is my time worth?
Yeah, at the moment, not much. So
Right, for sure. And like, but some people it's not worth much, and you're willing to do all those things, and others it is. Like I was just talking with a friend of mine right before I got on this about the there's like a pre-order for like the new like super accurate Hasbro made Ghostbusters proton pack, and it's $400. And you're saying like, oh, it's a little bit expensive. It's like, yeah, but how much money would you put into that? How much time would you put into that if you made it yourself?
oh
Now,
yeah,
granted, sometimes the point is making it yourself, which I 100% get.
that's right.
But oh, it's funny you mentioned like the open lasers and stuff, the open frame lasers and whatnot. It's like one of the other odd things that I'm a little bit known for. Um, is I guess in the end having really bad timing for lasers in 20 was it 2018. Time means nothing the last 2 years, so I
No,
think it
it
was
doesn't.
3 years ago. um, a friend of mine who's a woodworker came to me and said, like, I want a little laser because he knew I was into them. He's like, I want a laser that I can engrave my maker's mark on, like wood stuff that I build. And he's like, he said, but the problem is any laser that's big enough to fit most of these things in is really expensive.
Oh
Like, is
yeah,
there anything I can get that I can just, it's small and I can put it on the thing? And so his requirement was that it be small, like 100 millimeter square working area, that it be, portable, but then also because he has small children, that it be completely enclosed. And I ended up coming up with what we called the Engravinator. You can find out more about it at engravinator.com. And it's an open source diode laser engraver. It's mostly 3D printed, uses, most of the mechanical components are pretty much the exact same stuff on like i3 Prusa style 3D printers. So all the belts and rods and all of that stuff. And it came out with it. And at the time, a $400 bill of materials was reasonable. And then by the time we launched it, every company out of China had come out with like a 199 open frame
yeah. But
diode
that's
laser.
that's the thing. It's the open frame, though.
Right.
I mean, it's okay. To everyone listening, it's yes, I know it's not inherently unsafe. There are steps you can take, but it's also not safe to have it open. Period.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It might, I mean, you might not lose your eyesight, but your kid or your dog or your cat might,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
and
Or I
that's not
mean, you
safe.
can tilt it over, or you can be as cautious as you'd like, but maybe maybe you're using it in your workshop and there's a metal shaving underneath, so you go through it and then it bounces off the metal shaving right into your eyeball. I know it's
Hmm.
like it could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It only takes a mere moment to lose your eyesight forever from a laser mishap.
that's right.
Um, yeah, I'm funny about that. I have like, I don't know, 4 or 5 pairs of like laser safety goggles down in my workshop. So it's like if someone's over, it's like you will be wearing these. This is not an option.
It makes me nervous though, because I can't be 100% sure that the laser goggles they send you with those cheap open frame.
Oh, never use them. No,
Yeah,
ever.
exactly. But then how would you know exactly the wavelength of laser to buy safety glasses for?
I mean, they come in ranges. So like typical UV diode lasers are like somewhere between like 380 and like 420 nanometer, and 420 nanometer is not actually UV, it's just really close, but whatever. You can find ones that are rated for that range. I admit they're not cheap to get ones that are actually tested and rated. You know, the ones that I have for my CO2 lasers, which are of course a completely different range, because it's infrared and like far infrared. I mean, those like a good pair are 50, $60 a piece.
Yeah, and if you're listening, don't buy them from Amazon. That's kind of the same source as the lasers.
Yeah, they're going to be cheap Chinese ones. I mean, I did a lot of research when it came to the enclosure for the Engravinator, and so it's kind of weird with UV. Really, all you need is something that is on a different spectrum than, or is like in a different color range than what the laser is. So you don't want purple to shield you from a purple laser. So red works, green works, and orange is very common because it blocks most of the light, but it's very visible. And I went down this weird rabbit hole where I found out that 2422 amber, which is just like the color name of acrylic in 3 millimeter or thicker, is typically what's used on higher end systems.
Interesting.
And there's a handful of companies that will sell it, and they're rated for a specific optical density. And optical density is just how much, photon radiation it can absorb before it starts breaking down. And the only difference between what you buy from them and what I was able to source from a local supplier is that they've tested each batch.
That makes sense.
So I admit I'm not using stuff that is tested and rated and comes with a certificate for the machines that I've made, but it's also 1/5 the cost.
You can also put something that's very sensitive to lasers. So, let's say a black piece of cardboard or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then put your chosen acrylic on top, and then fire the laser through it. And I mean, you could tell if it absorbed most of the laser energy. If nothing scored the or touched the cardboard or whatever on the other side, then you can be pretty sure that it's going to do a good job.
Right. Well, and one of the other things is I will note is any laser safety goggles you get are not going to take a direct beam shot from the laser. Like if you just stick your eye into the laser beam, it's not going to protect it. It's purely for like scattered, reflected.
That's right.
Stuff. I do find that funny because with Lightburn and stuff, we get questions people saying, "Hey, I'm trying to cut acrylic with my diode laser." It's not going to work. It's going to go right through it.
Yeah, that's why the CO2 lasers are more common for acrylic cutting.
Right, and it's all about what wavelength that material absorbs. When you kind of get down into like the chemistry of it, it gets really interesting and weird.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. I haven't opened the box yet because I usually want to do it on camera. So I don't know what kind of diode laser this thing came with, but I guess I'm more interested in cutting than engraving. So I'm going to give this thing a try, and I'll probably push it way too far and try to do like 100 passes, changing the focus very slightly every time to see if I can burn through.
I mean, you'd be able to cut through paper and stuff. Anything like thicker things, yeah, it's going to be a lot of passes. And also when it comes to it, because you're working in a visible spectrum, the darker the material, the better. Like a lot of times, I'll see things too where people are like just trying to test on printer paper, which doesn't work at all because it just reflects the light.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because if you hold it out in the sun, the paper will be blinding. So it's obviously not absorbing a lot of that energy.
Right. And like that's why CO2 lasers work better is because they're infrared, and I mean infrared is effectively what we consider just to be radiant heat. So it's pure radiant heat directed at the thing, and most things will absorb it. But for weird physics reasons, most things won't absorb things that are close to the visible spectrum.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a deal in a K40 laser, but I think in Canada we have special laser laws, so they're very hard to get at a reasonable price.
Of course.
I mean, you're talking about a country where brass knuckles are illegal, so it is what it is.
My God. Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I mean, offline, talk to me if you're ever looking for one. I know enough people that we might be able to source something for you.
Yeah, I mean, they are available here. I have to say they are available, but like if I'm looking here, let's see, price plus shipping, doing this live on the recording here, I believe they are about $600 to $700.
So yeah, about 30 to 50% more than here. You can get one
Something
for
like that.
about $400. I mean, granted, a K40 is a lot like buying like an Ender or something like that, where it's fine, but then you're going to spend a lot on upgrading it if you want it to be like really good. Um,
Oh yeah, but
they're a good base platform, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you got to start somewhere, and I'm all for that.
yeah, $660 with free shipping from the US. So it's probably going to be held up at the border for a little bit.
Yep, I know how that is.
Yeah, a
That's
bit
always fun.
expensive. However, we've been rambling on for just about an hour now, and I haven't shot you the question that I shoot all my guests. So can
Okay,
I throw that to you now?
sure, I'm ready.
All right. So the question goes: you get a government grant to start the business of your dreams, which does not have to be profitable, but it does have to provide either a product or a service or both. What kind
Uh-huh.
of business would you start?
Oh, that's easy. I've been dreaming about it for years. Um, I would have a makerspace effectively. Um, there's a lot of things I would want to do with it, but I would want to I want to have like the most ridiculously appointed workshop with any kind of thing you could ever imagine to make anything. And I don't mean just the quote unquote hard maker skills. If you want to sew, great. If you want to do, weaving, great. If you want to do pottery, great. We've got it. I want all of the things. I want it to be fully staffed with people to teach, be it volunteer or paid. If I get a government grant and the funding is unlimited, then absolutely get, really good paid people to do it. But I realize that maker spaces are a thing that exists, but they're perpetually underfunded.
They are.
So it's truly like, a lot of people are like, if I won the lottery, I would, buy a yacht and, buy a mansion. I would buy a 20,000 square foot workshop. And
I would also buy a yacht.
Yeah. Okay, fine. but I would teach classes there, and I would teach people how to make stuff.
Yeah, that is you know what? I feel like this. So a lot of people, when I ask this question, they're telling me they don't want to give the cliche answer of starting a makerspace. but it's not. The thing is, it's not cliche. It's what makers believe in.
Right.
I haven't met a single maker, and maker is a very broad term. It includes coders, it includes woodworkers, it includes sewers, it includes singers, it includes all this stuff.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't met a single maker that didn't want to share their passion with other people and even like invite people into their world. And I think that is the most important thing. So it is, to me, it's not a cliche at all. It's just a reinforcement of what makes the maker movement so awesome, is this inclusivity.
Yep.
And I'm also glad that you mentioned, sewing and whatever, because a lot of people feel like when they're sewing, they're not making, but you're making. I mean, it's making. It's just making.
Heck, we'll have a room full of typewriters and whatever. If you want to write a book, I don't care. It can be whatever. Like, it'd be the kind of thing where I'd really want it to be someone's like, hey, I want to do this. Do you have the tools for it? No, but we'll get them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. It's like when the library doesn't have the book you want, you just request it and they buy it.
Right. And I mean, obviously, like, I want it to be everywhere. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I'm very passionate about the fact that, we need more critical thinkers and people to be able to realize that they can do things for themselves and make things for themselves and learn things for themselves. And I think there's too much now where they just, you don't. It's like, well, I don't need to know how to do that because, like, someone else will do it for me or whatever. And I think that people that can learn how to, build things, whatever it is, for themselves are going to be much more well-rounded and able to kind of, navigate the crazy world that we live in right now.
Absolutely. And I'll also quote one of my favorite makers, Adam Savage. He says, welding and sewing are essentially the same thing. It's putting together 2D shapes within a certain confine of rules to make 3D shapes. That's all it is.
Exactly. Well, and you're joking before about sewing and all that stuff. It's still making like everything else. Like, one of the things I've told my wife this before. I would have a giant sign on the wall that, there will be no maker shaming here for whatever it is.
Yeah,
If you're,
it doesn't make sense. I hate gatekeeping.
yeah,
I hate it.
absolutely. Well, and that was a big problem in the kind of the early days of the quote unquote maker community, where like everyone was like, well, no, it's Arduino and Raspberry Pi and Blinky things, and it's like, no, it's everything. And, I've been lucky enough to go to Bay Area Maker Faire and a handful of the other large ones like that, and it's just beautiful how many different things they have there now. Well, now they don't do them anymore, but um,
hopefully we can get back to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, like what was it? 2019 Bay Area Maker Faire was the last one that I know of that they were planning. I'm hoping they can maybe get back to it after things get a little bit more back to normal. But it's beautiful to see that, and like I run a Discord server with a bunch of friends, a lot of them former Red Hatters like myself, and we made a maker channel on there, and like someone posted on there one day something about, oh, well, I was making this, but I wasn't really sure if it belonged here because it's just sewing a costume. And I responded with, there will be no maker shaming here, even to yourself.
Yeah. It's such a negative thing that if someone else happens upon that post, then they'll feel reinforced that what they're doing is not making, which is
right.
Which is not true.
Right. Yeah. I want to see everything. I want to see people make anything that makes them happy, whatever that is.
And a lot of people that I asked to come onto the podcast, they say, well, they're not really into electronics. I'm like, yeah, that's the name of the podcast, but it's more of a maker podcast.
Right.
I just didn't have a name. So I just named it the same thing as my YouTube channel.
Naming is hard. I've spent more time staring at a computer screen trying to decide what to name that new computer and OS install than just about anything else.
Yep. Yeah. And the way I work is that if I get a bout of motivation, I need to capitalize on it, because who knows how long it's going to take for it to come back. So
right.
I felt like starting the podcast, and instead of letting not having a name stop me from starting it, I said, I'm going to start it. And then if I need to change it, I have a couple of weeks before I need to finalize it. So yep. I had to do it.
It's like at the very beginning of the pandemic, I made a giant pen plotter, among other things. You can put a laser on it and all that stuff. And I jokingly called it the Cyber Plotter. And a friend of mine asked me, why'd you call it the Cyber Plotter? I said, when I was trying to figure out the name, they had just announced the Cybertruck.
Yep.
That was it. It was in my head, and I didn't want to think about it beyond that. Just move on. Just build the thing.
Did you buy the URL, cyberplotter.com?
I didn't know.
It's probably worth 10 times now.
Probably is. That's yeah. That's usually I'm pretty good about that. I'll buy up the domains. I have way too many domain names that I technically own, because I'll do stuff like that. But yeah.
I have a couple domains, but they do nothing for me. I need to get my web skills up. I have a huge project we can talk about off air, because I don't want anybody pressuring me to do it. But yeah, I have a huge project, it's going to take, hundreds of hours. And, I think I've already renewed the domain on it. So it's like, come on, let's go.
That is a real thing. I one time I started a project, I bought a domain for it, and then I got busy. And then it was, a while later, I got an email from my domain registrar. Do you want to renew this domain? I'm like, oh God, it's been a year.
Yeah, I know. It's
I never did anything.
Yeah, my lack of time management comes back to bite me every year when I have to pay for the damn domain that's done nothing for me.
I have so many that are like that, where I was like, I'm going to do this thing, and then you got to get the domain first, and then you just don't. You don't.
Yeah. I'm finally getting help, because a lot of actual wizards, software devs, yes, they've reached out to me and they want to, work for free, like making a website. And I'm like, I don't want you to work for free. And then finally one guy said, look, man, like, this is not just for you. I need a project to sink my teeth into, right, and I'm retired, and this would be a benefit to all of us. And I'm like, okay, fine. you're on board. So me and this gentleman, we're going to be working on a project together, but
nice.
I still feel uncomfortable. It doesn't feel right.
That is definitely an issue. I mean, but it's kind of like with open source. Like people are only there because they want to be. If it's free, it's one thing if you're asking them to do it, quote unquote, for exposure, but it's another thing if they offer.
Yeah. I don't offer exposure. People die of exposure.
Especially up where you live.
Yep. It won't take long at -40. I'm expecting
Oh my
late
God.
January it's going to be -40 C here, which I think is around
Just
-40
minus
F.
40 F. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
where they
okay.
meet. I grew up not far from there.
Oh, there we go. From
Yeah.
near the border, I'm guessing.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York, around the Adirondack State Park, but then I went to college in Potsdam, which was about an hour's drive from Ottawa. We used to go there frequently.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I know I've met some people from the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and they basically are treated like the Canadians of the US, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's a whole different world up there. And like I live down in the South now, and that's partly because I got out of college, for 4 years living up in the frozen tundra. And the job I got, they offered me either Syracuse, New York, which is still very cold, or Charlotte, North Carolina. And that sounded great.
North Carolina is kind of, am I right? That's kind of like the East Coast tech hub, isn't it?
Yeah, especially Raleigh, because I originally moved to Charlotte and then I moved to Raleigh for the tech stuff, and it is crazy. We're having a massive housing boom here right now, and so many of them are from California and like Seattle and Oregon. They're all moving here because the West Coast is on fire.
Like literally half the year.
Yeah, literally on fire. And even though housing is booming and really expensive here, for us, it's cheap for them. So sell a house and move here and still make a profit. But so it's not as bad. But yeah, it's a big tech hub. I mean, IBM has had a presence here for decades, since the 50s or 60s. And then out of that was the sort of what's called the Research Triangle Park, which is with Raleigh and Durham. And honestly, I don't know what the other part of that triangle is.
Yeah, we had
Couldn't tell you.
a lot of tech here in the west end of the town. We had like Corel headquarters here. We had
Nice.
a few big big tech giants here, but I think they've pulled out in order to go to like Mexico or parts of the third world at this point, because the cost of living here in Ottawa, I think it's only like a single digit percentage points better than California at this point.
Oh wow,
It's gotten bad.
That's terrible.
We bought our house while I was still working full time back in 2012, and I believe it's gone up like I think about somewhere between 40 and 50% since then.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and most of it in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Our house has been similar. I bought mine 9 years ago, and it's worth way more than it was before.
And let me be clear, my house is tiny. Like it's 1,200 square feet.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Because we know some of our like near our house there are homes that were worth somewhere like 800,000, and now they're approaching 2 mil. Because bigger houses, since the lockdown, bigger houses have been more popular because people, if they work at home, they don't want to be tearing each other's heads off.
I've seen a couple of houses where they basically have like in-home cubicles that have been built. I know it sounds terrible, but it's like, if someone doesn't necessarily want to pay the extra for an extra 400 square feet of space, but they want an office that they can close off. It's a big enough room to stick a computer and a chair and a desk.
Yeah, I was teaching from my like where I'm sitting right now, which is in my my YouTube workshop. So
nice.
That was fun.
Yeah. I had the weirdest luck when it came to the adjustment to working from home, which is I got the job with Lightburn starting on March 1st of 2020, and I was working from home full time. And then a week later, everything shut down.
Huh.
So I left Red Hat and was like, okay, I'm going to make this transition. And then, a week later, all of my friends were scrambling to find monitors and webcams and just nice chairs and things like that. And I had been spending the previous 3 months getting my home office set up.
So you were doing the work from home stuff before it was cool. You're kind of like a hipster in that account.
Apparently, no. It's just, I mean, it was just kind of the way it goes. Like we have, I don't know, a dozen people at this point. I'm sure it'll be more by the time this actually airs. Um, and we have no office. It's all just our homes.
That's the
Because
cool thing about software.
yeah, I mean, we have employees spanning from California to the UK.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
it's a big span.
and Canada actually.
Sweet. I mean,
Yep.
they're. I don't want you to be jealous or anything, but they are earning about 35% more than you are. Just so you know.
I mean, that's fine. That's fine.
But they are spending more than 35% more than
Right.
you.
I know. I do always find that funny. Like, some of my family lives in Switzerland, and it's like, well, yeah, they get paid a lot more, but also the cost of living is a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Like even more so than it would be living in, you know, Silicon Valley or something like that.
Big time.
It gets pretty crazy. But
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've been rambling. I know this is a podcast in its long form, but we've already been going about an hour and 15 minutes. So very important though, we have to tell people where to find you. So where do you want them to find you? Do you want them to go check out your websites, your Twitter?
sure. I have websites, technically adamhaile.com and adamhaile.net, but I don't really use them. One of them redirects to maniacallabs.com, which is the company I used to run. The main place you'd find me is on Twitter at dreadmakeradam, kind of as in Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yep, a little bit of a reference there. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, Dreadmaker Adam on Twitter is where I usually hang out and do stuff. Post about things I made.
Okay. And is there any way that people can support you? Do you have a Patreon or anything like that?
I don't. I mean, you know, get into lasers and buy Lightburn, I guess. That's my job. But no, I don't have a Patreon for any of my side personal stuff.
Email him and ask for more Lightburn features, and then maybe they can sell you a DLC.
Oh my god! Oh, that would be really funny if like normal desktop software had like, I mean, like sometimes they do, but like if it was sold like it was for games.
Yeah, like the feature is fully in there in the window, but you go to click it and it redirects to a web page. Like
right.
You have to buy this for $2.99.
Right. Well, and clearly what desktop software needs is loot boxes.
Oh my god! You know what? We shouldn't say it out loud. We're going to invoke the big. I mean, I wouldn't put it past EA to automatically do release some sort of desktop software
for sure.
Oh God! All right. Well, so go follow on Twitter. I'll put all of I'll put all of Adam's links in the description below, and there are some on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And I want to thank you guys all for listening. And Adam, thanks so much for taking your time to sit down with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
No problem. And I hope you guys will tune in for the next episode. Catch you next time.